What is an everyday giver? An everyday giver is someone who gives something big or small every day without asking. Some might say that giving without asking is a sure way to end up empty-handed, like this beach at low tide. But just as the tide goes out, the tide always returns. And that's what everyday givers know. When the tide of giving returns, it brings with it benefits in powerful and tangible ways that can't be measured in material terms. It's all about the way that giving makes you feel, the feeling of fulfillment you get when you give. Just ask the students from Bishop Moore, Cathedral High, and Monsignor Scanlon in New York. They played a leadership role with the Archdiocese of New York to introduce an Everyday Giver pilot program in 2008 as part of preparing for their volunteer programs in school. In the program, they read the stories of everyday givers profiled in the book Reclaiming the Sky by Tom Murphy. The book tells the story of courageous aviation workers in Boston, New York, and Washington, people such as Sue Bear, who led Newark Airport through the crisis of 9/11. She, as well as others profiled in the book, created personal paths to recovery by doing for others and thus serve as fitting role models for young people. The students from Moore, Cathedral, and Scanlon read Reclaiming the Sky and discussed the lessons in class. They kept journals to record how they were applying the themes, and finally they wrote essays expressing what they learned. In May 2007, they came together to read their essays.
In the book Reclaiming the Sky, I was most inspired by Sue Bear. While following her through her journey as the book progressed, I realized she is a very strong individual. I could not recall one time in the book that she focused on how she felt and the chaos of it all. She was constantly thinking about what she could do to make other people cope with the situation they were going through.
We wish to thank officials from the New York Archdiocese for their leadership with this program, including Sister Marie Pappas, Dr. Mary Jane Krebs, and Dr. Jackie LaFaro. And thank the faculty and students from Bishop Moore, Cathedral High, and Monsignor Scanlon for their enthusiasm and support. In 2009, the program will expand as the Human Resiliency Institute works with the Center for Catholic Leadership at Fordham to grow the program into a national model. The goal is to help other students prepare for their volunteer work by following in the footsteps of the lead group who took the Everyday Giver program and learn life lessons as they did by studying the courage of aviation workers. But best to leave an explanation of those lessons and what can be learned to the students themselves.
Hi, my name is Marlene. I'm from Monsignor Scanlon High School and I'm a senior. And the beginning of the year, right? Ms. Sheridan, our club moderator from campus ministry, said, read this book. I said, for what? She was like, read the book because you just like it. She just told me, just read the book. So I read it, and then a couple of months later, she's like, so did you read that book? I'm like, yeah, I read it. And then she's like, what you think about it? And I was like, it's crazy. She was like, what you mean it's crazy? I was like, it's crazy how we don't know what goes on behind the scenes and how their actions reflected on the positive that came out of such a bad situation and how they tried to prevent it and help out those that were involved.
Excellent. And who, in reading that story, who struck you or who did you learn from?
Anne McFarland.
And tell me what you learned from Anne.
Well, Anne's story is that her daughter, before leaving, said, her mom said bye. She was like, no, Mom, it's not bye, it's I'll see you later. And her daughter died in the World Trade Center. And then Anne went out and she was giving out hugs to other people. And she didn't do anything spectacular. She didn't go and do something that people were like, oh, you deserve the Nobel Prize. She was just giving comfort to those and finding in her own comfort for the loss of her daughter and for giving those that little bit of help from a stranger. Well, we surpassed all that, all of us. Not because we want to have an award for the most community service, but we do it because of the principle of the matter. And I feel that with the little that we do, or that we try and do, we're making an impact slowly but surely on society.
The thing, we live in New York, we have to speed it up, speed it up, speed it up. So Sue taught me to process my thoughts like in an instant and to make the wisest decision as quick as possible. And in my community service, like sometimes I don't feel like doing it, like you said earlier. Like sometimes it's just like, oh, I'd rather stay home sleeping Saturday. Like who really wants to go do community service? But every time I go do community service, honestly, that's the thought that I think. I really don't want to do it. But it's that little thought that comes in, you know what, I'm just going to do it and get it over with, and I'm going to have a good time. So that's what Sue taught me.
And what about, you had a point about the spaces between the buildings. What do you mean by that? Explain.
Actually, the diagram you drew, I still use it today. It still helps me. Like, calculate my thoughts. Like,
Tell me what the diagram is.
the diagram is buildings, just regular buildings in a row, and every space in between the building you may think is unnecessary, but it really is necessary. It, first of all, it separates the buildings, which, you know, they can't be overcrowded, but in a more symbolic meaning, they represent all those people, all those little people that help us along the way that you forget, like all the aviation crew. Like, we think very little about them, but they're the ones who hold everything together. And also all the actions we do, all the little community service things, like Marnie was saying, even though if it's just picking up a bottle in the street and littering it, or serving in a nursing home, yeah, it helps out. Little things do help out, just like those little spaces in between the buildings.
Explain.
The diagram you drew, I still use it today. It still helps me, like, calculate my thoughts. Like,
Tell me what the diagram is.
the diagram is buildings, just regular buildings in a row, and every space in between the building you may think is unnecessary, but